Richard Loving, a white man, wanted to marry Mildred Jeter, a black woman. This was not allowed in Virginia, so in order to get married, Richard and Mildred went to Washington, D.C. on June 2nd of 1958. Virginia did not allow anybody to go to another state to get married and then come back to live in Virginia. Because of this, Commonwealth's attorney Bernard Mahon obtained warrants for the arrest of Richard and Mildred Loving. The Circuit Court of Caroline County issued an accusation against Richard and Mildred Loving, stating that they were going against the state law because of their interracial marriage. Not knowing what to do, Richard and Mildred contact Judge Leon Bazille. He ends up accepting their guilty plea and agreed to suspend their 1-year prison sentence only if they leave Virginia and promise not to come back as a couple for 25 years. Richard and Mildred did not plan on leaving Virginia, and as a result, they contacted Bernard Cohen, an attorney in Virginia, to appeal their conviction. On February 11th of 1965, the 3-judge district court gave Richard and Mildred a chance to present their case. They ended up appealing to the Supreme Court of Virginia in March the following year. However, their request was denied. In December of 1966, despite Cohen trying to get Richard and Mildred their right to get married, he was assisted by the National ACLU, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Japanese American Citizens League, and an association of Catholic bishops and other sympathetic organizations. The Virginia Supreme Court still supported the conviction of Mildred and Richard Loving. A year after the ruling of the Virginia Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court arguments began in Mildred and Richard Loving's case against the constitutionality of Virginia's anti-miscegenation statutes. In a unanimous ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, Virginia's anti-miscegenation statutes were struck down, stating that to deny the fundamental freedom of marriage on so unsupportable a basis as race is surely to deprive all the state's citizens of liberty without due process of law. As a result, the Loving v. Virginia case established the legal basis for a cultural redefinition of marriage. After the Loving v. Virginia case, interracial marriages became more common and accepted in the U.S. The fight that Richard and Mildred Loving put up increased the acceptance of African Americans in the U.S. and decreased racism. That was, of course, difficult to accomplish. Can you please describe the race relations in Virginia at the time during this case?
They, like throughout most of the South, not very good. Blacks had been segregated and really not given equal rights ever since the time, that slavery had ended. And so there's a lot of tension because at this point there's pressure building to end segregation and to open up society for more equality, and so a lot of people are frustrated and on edge and really worried about what the future holds.
And how would you say that the impact of the Richard and Mildred Loving getting married in Virginia?
Well, it certainly went against the norms of society there, for white people in particular. Of all the things that whites in Virginia in this time period were worried about, this sort of thing, a cross marriage, was really on the top of the list, that they didn't want this sort of association. That's why they really pushed for segregation. Today, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense because we're much more open to that idea. But back then, it was really, really a concern of people, which is why they had made it illegal.
So would you say that this was one of the cases that helped blacks get rights in the U.S.?
It's one of many, yes. It comes after Brown v. Board, which is kind of the opening gunshot here, or the opening of the race, so to speak, to bring about change. And Brown v. Board, of course, overturned Plessy and said that the separate but equal clause of Jim Crow was unconstitutional. Now, if you're going to pull the plug on Jim Crow, then you're going to pull the plug on lots of other laws, like this one in Virginia that did not allow mixed marriage in regard to race. So clearly this is one of several cases that's going to build momentum.